You are being forwarded to the contact center coach.
This program is sponsored by Proponisi, where I'm the president and CEO. Proponisi is the Greek word for coaching. We provide SaaS technology to centers like yours. Most contact centers struggle with their people, whether it be overcoming monotony, attrition, or getting superior performance. Our solution makes it easier and cost-effective to get even more than you could possibly have expected from your front line. The result is loyal customers, engaged employees, and winning, provable, profitable results. You can reach us at proponisi.com.
Hello and welcome to the Contact Center Coach video. I'm Michael Tamer, and it's great to have you here again. And yes, I have very few videos so far, but if you're looking, it means you're following my podcast, which we're up to 79 different audio podcasts that are completely focused on the contact center, and all you do is hear me when you hear the audio podcast. But in these video podcasts, it's much better because I bring in really bright, talented, smart people to come add some value. And so today, that's certainly the case as well. I'd like to introduce you to Annette Franz. Annette, welcome.
Hello, nice to see you again. Great to be on the show. Happy to be here. Looking forward to our conversation, definitely.
Well, when I talk about smart and bright, this is it. And I've told you that I want to try to bring you world-class leaders in different areas and people that I think are wildly smart and are important for you to hear from. And when it comes to customer experience, this is the person that you want to listen to. So let me tell you now why you should want to listen to her. So Annette Franz, CCXP founder and CEO of CX Journey, Inc., has spent the last 30 years in the customer experience profession. She started her career at J.D. Power and Associates in 1992 and spent much of the next 25 years before founding CX Journey, Inc. in 2017, leading consulting services for the major voice of the customer platforms, helping clients in a variety of industries develop and execute their customer experience strategies. She has also worked on the client side customer experience strategy for Mattel and Fidelity Investments and Compilon. Annette is an internationally recognized customer experience thought leader, coach, keynote speaker, and author of 2 books. The first one being Customer Understanding: 3 Ways to Put the Customer in Customer Experience and at the Heart of Your Business. I like that title. And then her second book, Built to Win: Designing a Customer-Centric Culture That Drives Value for Your Business. It dives into the 10 foundational principles of a customer-centric culture. It was released in March of 2022. She's a certified customer experience professional, thus the CCXP, and an official member of the Forbes Coaches Council. And you've heard her name before because if you've listened to my audio podcasts, I've mentioned her a number of times. And I want to tell you the compliment that I gave her when we were setting up this meeting. And all my books I read on Kindle, and I am a voracious reader. I have so many books that I read. I love to read. It's a way for me to relax and I learn more, and I just love reading. And I told her that hers is the first Kindle book that I'm now going to have to go buy the real book, because I really do want to make notes and highlight and put in pieces of paper so that I can remember some of the stuff in there. So Annette, first off, Annette and I are not friends, but I am a fan. I'm a big fan. I loved your book. And again, my second welcome to you. Happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. And wow, what an introduction. And I love that. That's a great compliment, and I hear that from others too, is that the book is just sitting there sort of, dog-eared and notes and just, it's there as sort of a guide. And I love that. So thank you for that.
Well, so as we've discussed, the lens or filter that the majority of my listeners and watchers, I guess now, the lens that they look through is through a contact center. And so we see things through that. So right out of the gates, we toss around the term customer centric all the time, but you make a distinction between customer centric and customer focus. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think that, and that is sort of the catalyst for writing this book too, is I think a lot of people don't really understand what it means to be customer centric. And it is very different from being customer focused. I say that customer focused is sort of more a tactical, it's the person in front of you type of relationship or conversation, versus customer centric being really at the heart of the business. It's our DNA. It's how we do things around here. And I define it as no discussions, no decisions, no designs without bringing the customer voice in and really asking, how is this going to impact the customer? How's it going to make her feel? What value is it going to add for her? And that's, and we do that in everything that we do. It's organization wide, it's enterprise wide, versus customer focus really is, hey, I'm sitting here and I'm talking to you and you're my customer. And yes, I'm very, aware and attentive to you and your needs. But that doesn't necessarily mean that when I walk away from here, that everything else I do in my day-to-day work is going to bring that customer into, that customer voice into it. So I think that's a really important distinction to make, is that being customer-centric really is, simple definition is the customer's at the center of all you do, but there's so much more to that, right? You have to bring that voice in. You have to really think about what you're doing and how what you're doing impacts the customer, every customer.
So if I'm in a company and man, I kind of always thought we were customer centric, and and I felt like we were customer centric. So when I'm walking the halls or reading my emails or talking to my peers or listening to my leaders, what are some of the attributes of customer centric versus customer focused?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's not just walking the halls and having those conversations. It's everything we do, right? Everything we do. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday and I said, Jeff Bezos and his empty chair in his e-staff meetings was a great example of how that organization was being customer centric, right? Or is customer centric. It's, hey, the customer always has a presence in everything that we do and everything that we say and everything that we create. The customer we're so conscious of why and how we're doing these things for and because of the customer, versus, again, customer focus being very, very, yeah, we have customers and we're having these conversations, or we're having these interactions with customers, or yeah, I'm putting this in, into the box and packaging it up for the customer, so I need to make it look nice, that kind of thing. But it's very, I call it tactical, but I feel like it's very transactional, versus being customer centric is really thinking about the entirety of the business and the entirety of the relationship with the customer and all of that, right? So it just has a bigger, more powerful DNA sort of feeling to it.
So this is my second plug for your book, and that is that when you read it, you cover stuff at a really high level, but then you have a lot of things that you can write out, and charts and questionnaires and things that will allow you to get down from kind of the high level to the detail. So the second thing that I want to talk about is that you got 10 foundational principles in your book, and one of them is employees must be put more first. You didn't say employees must be put first. You said more first, which I think is just stinking cool. But why? Tell me more about it.
Well, I wish those were my words, but it comes from Hal Rosenbluth International, the travel international travel company. He wrote a book back in 1992 called "The Customer Comes Second," and that's like, whoa, you can't say that, right? But his whole point is that if we're going to put the customer first, then we need to put the employee more first. And really, what that means is, and what it acknowledges, is that the employee and the employee experience drives the customer experience. Without employees to design, build, sell, implement, promote, service, the products and services that we have, there is no customer experience, right? And so his whole point was really, if we're going to put customers first, then we need to put employees more first and make sure that they have a great experience, make sure that they have the tools and the resources and everything that they need to do their jobs well. And so I love that. And I thought that's a really important part. We talk about customer centric, but you can't be customer centric without employees having a great experience. So it was a really important part of the book. And I think I even mentioned in the book that we could just call this people centric, right? We just need to be more human and be really people centric and put the people, and some of the principles, people before products, profits, and metrics, right? If we put the people first, the outcomes will come. And so that was really that whole notion of employees more first as well. Employees drive the customer experience, and ultimately that drives the numbers for the business.
Well, so I've got a bunch of things that I want to make sure that you say, and people come before products, profits, and you need to understand for a contact center, the products and profits that matters, but in a contact center, the metrics is what drives everything that's going on in a contact center. So when you endorse that people matter more than metrics, that's a big deal. I heard Herb Kelleher say once, and I thought it was brilliant. He was speaking in a group, and of course, this was back in I guess it was the 90s maybe. And so he's in a hotel. It's 10:30 in the morning. He's got a glass of scotch and he's smoking a cigarette inside a non-smoking building. And that was just Herb Kelleher. Yeah, and right. Somebody asked him the question. They said, why is Southwest Airlines so successful? So he took a drag on a cigarette and, took a sip of his scotch and said, well, that's pretty simple. We love our people. And our people love our customers. And when you have that much love going around, you can make a lot of money.
Right. Exactly. Now that's a great point. It's a great point. And you're absolutely right. Contact centers really do focus a lot on metrics. And I had a client that I was working with recently, and we were doing some journey mapping workshops, and we were ideating future state, coming up with what the new experiences would look like.
I'm sorry. What's the definition of ideate?
Ideate is, yes. It's a form of brainstorming, right? So maybe
okay.
For brainstorming, but so we were doing that, and one of the employees started to talk about metrics. Oh, well, we can't do that because we have to answer questions within X amount of time, or we have to do this within X amount of time. And started really focusing on metrics. And I said, hold on a second here. That's not why we're here. This is really all about shifting that thinking completely away from that, because you know what? The work that we do to improve the experience, to improve the culture, all that, it's not about actually doing more work and not meeting your metrics or whatever. If we do things with the customer in mind, we're doing them more efficiently and more effectively. We don't have to worry about the metrics because we will always beat those metrics, right? They're not even a part of the equation because we're doing it for the customer. And even if, I know there's that classic story of Zappos and the Zappos customer that was on the phone for 11 hours or whatever it was, and they ordered pizza and they did all these different things, right? But even if we do that, look at the relationships that we're building. I think one of the things that we have to think about, especially in the contact center too, is about that relationship building, and it not just being sort of this transactional or this single point, interaction. We're talking about the bigger picture, and we want to make sure that our customers feel good and they don't feel rushed on the phone because you have a metric that you've got to meet, that I've got to get this customer off the phone in 2 minutes or whatever it is, right? And so I think that's a huge part of a customer-centric organization is the metrics, not that they don't matter, but they don't come first. The customer comes first, and then we'll worry about the metrics later, because we're going to be meeting those metrics because we're doing everything for the right reason.
Yeah. So there's probably a number of people that are watching this that are supervisors in a contact center, and they used to be on the phone, maybe last week, last month, or last year. And as hard as contact centers don't try to focus on average handle time, they focus on average handle time. And most people don't see it for what it really is. That the reality is, if the organization's got to set a schedule. They've got to set a plan. And so, and the only way to do that is to have a target average handle time. And so let's just say it's 7 minutes. And the problem isn't the 7 minutes, because most people can meet the 7 minutes. It's that there's kind of 3 different types of people that are in there. There's kind of roses, daisies, and weeds. And sometimes the weeds are brand new and they just can't do it in 7 minutes. And so if you don't take care of the people and hold on to your best people and keep them in, and you have to go get new people, no matter how bright and brilliant they are, it takes them a while to get to ramp up. And so you end up in this vicious cycle where you kind of have to watch it, because if you don't, you can't answer the phone. It's as you know, it's a quagmire. It's a very difficult circumstance. So sometimes I think there's a disconnect between the C level, right? And what happens down on the floor, because that $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, $1 million call center cost difference in $1 billion company. The $1 billion company hasn't even thought about it, but the person that's in the contact center is, can barely get by or can't live with it. So I guess I'm looking for some comments on that.
No, I think, and I think it's a vicious cycle too. It's interesting that you say that, okay, well, we've got 7 minutes, and if it's a newbie, they might not be able to take care of things in 7 minutes or whatever that time frame is, right? I think this speaks volumes to why people quit. If we haven't prepared them, if we haven't done the proper training before we put them on the floor, before we put them on the phone, right, so that they can meet those metrics, what's the point? Because what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, well, for the last 3 weeks, you have your calls are all taking 10 minutes or longer, and the metric is 7. So now people are going to feel, demotivated, right? I mean, not motivated. This is now we're talking about the whole, quiet quitters thing is like, okay, so I was not properly prepared to do the job that you need me to do. And your expectations are here, and the training and the preparation was here, the tools and the resources are here. Don't put people in that position, right? Make sure that you train them properly, give them what they need to be able to meet those metrics. Otherwise, it's frustrating for employees, and then you wonder why they quit. They're going to quit because of that, right? So I think that's a big issue. And I think, yesterday or a couple of days ago, somebody had posted a poll on LinkedIn, and they were asking about, what are some of the factors when it comes to the employee experience? What are the things that keep people motivated or keep them, happy? And the first of all, the poll was poorly designed. It was double barrel responses, praise and pay. Well, you can't put those both in the same place. That was the first response choice. And I was like,
that's the burden of being an expert right there. That's the burden of being an expert.
It's painful. It hurts me. but it was so funny because one of the things that are missing in the list, and I'm so glad the people that commented on this said the same thing. They're like, what about tools and resources and training and really providing people with what they need to do the job that you're expecting them to do? And it's so funny because I've had so many clients where I've heard when I interview the employees, when I first start working with them, the employees say, well, I was told what the job was going to be in the interview, and then I come to work and it's either completely different, or I'm not given what I need to do my job, and it's like that. So I know I've kind of scattered away from your original question at first, but I think that's a big problem is we can't have these metrics if we're not preparing employees to do the jobs that they were hired to do. And I think that's the crux of the employee experience is give them what they need to do their jobs and do them well. Nobody comes to work and says, hey, I'm going to do a crappy job. That's why I'm here, is I'm going to do a crappy job today. I think we all want to be motivated and inspired to do great things, right? But it doesn't always happen that way.
So when you say employees more first, or in any time you talk about employees or employee engagement or employee experience, you march right into culture.
Yes.
And you march right into culture and the importance of culture. And you spend a lot of time talking about culture. And you had some notes in there which I thought were really fascinating, which was a Grant Thornton paper, whatever it was called Return on Culture from 2019. You said two things which would warm the hearts of people that work in a contact center, right? Which was that in this study that they did, 49% of employees would leave a job to go to lower pay for better culture. And then the second thing was 45% better chance of retaining, or people with great culture, 45% retaining of 6 years or more. And so and obviously you listed, probably 100 other returns on culture kind of a thing, but talk about the importance of culture, please.
Yeah. And, culture and employee experience are not the same thing, but I feel like culture is a precursor. You come in, employee experience, you've got, I define that as, some of the interactions that an employee has with the employer over the life or the duration of employment, plus, some of the things we just talked about, making sure you have the tools and the capabilities and everything, conditions are right, kind of thing. Whereas culture is, core values plus behavior. And it really is how we do things around here. And culture is not, ping pong tables and beer Fridays and things like that. Sure, that adds to the fun part of the culture, right? But culture is really that core values plus behaviors. And if we, people say, people leave managers. I say people leave culture because, and sort of the two actually go. Yeah, they do really go together because the culture is really, I forget who said this, Larry Sen, I think it was, who said the culture is the shadow of the leader. So they go hand in hand. And if we build a culture where we don't care about our employees, if we don't have that sort of people first approach to our culture, and that defines our culture, then it becomes a painful employee experience. So that's why culture is so important. It really is the foundation of the business and the organization, and it leads to a lot of good things. If you've got a great culture, ultimately, as you look down the line, and you probably saw that sort of linkage graphic in the book too, where it goes from great culture, great employee experience, employee productivity, customer experience, and then ultimately the outcomes for the business. And some of those outcomes include, being a employer of choice, right? Being easy to attract talent because you have this great culture, and employees are out there talking about how great it is. So it really is the foundation of everything that you do.
And in today's world where the biggest concern in contact centers is turnover. And it's even more so now because of the fact that there's more people that are at home, which has completely flipped the culture upside down, but they also can't find people. They just can't find people to hire. So holding on to your best people becomes, it's always important. I don't even want to say it's more important now, but it is, right? If I can slow down the flow out, then I don't need as many, I don't need to bring as many in. And a poor culture, means that, the people that work for you telling their friends, or not telling their friends, hey, you need to come here. They're saying, anywhere but here, can I go with you?
Yeah, exactly.
So you have so many stories in your book about culture. Just if you just pick or any experiences or just places you've seen or been that just do things that you go, wow, I don't work here, but I sure would like to.
Yeah, there have actually been a couple of clients of mine where that's happened, and we've turned the culture around, right? Where it was really driven, product driven, sales driven, just really the focus was all wrong, right? Didn't even know who their customers were. We went through a whole exercise, who your customers are, and, I wrapped up that work probably about 6 months ago. And when we finished, the customer was front and center, right? The work that we had done, a lot of work with the CEO, a lot of work with the executive team to make sure that everybody was on the same page, but they got it. And once they got it, and once that was constantly incorporated into their messaging and how they talked and how they interacted with employees and how they ultimately interacted with the customers and their vendors too, what a different world, and everyone was better for it, and everybody felt really good about like the change that I saw in employees and their attitudes as they came into the office or even just on our virtual meetings was night and day from when we started, and so that's how you hope every business transforms, right? And that was over a 2-year period. So I don't want anybody to think that we can do this stuff overnight. We can't do this stuff overnight. It does take time, and it starts at the top, and then it starts it starts at the top, and then we move on to focusing on the culture and making sure that that is right. So yeah, it's possible, it happens, but it takes time, and I think that's probably one of the things that people are concerned about. Well, can we do this in 3 months? And I say no.
Yeah.
No.
So you make the comment in there that you can't say we think customers, you have to be able to say we know.
Yeah.
So you take 500 people in a contact center and they're taking thousands if not millions of calls. So they think they know them, right? Because they certainly know their problems, and they certainly know what percentage of problems they have. They know how long it takes to normally solve one of those problems. So, in your book, you talk about personas and journeys and customer journeys and understand the piece. Give us a layman's understanding of what knowing them kind of really entails, and what does that mean to know them?
Yeah, it's doing the work, doing the research and going out and talking to customers. And so personas are groups of customers who are, for lack of a better way, let's call them like-minded, but not necessarily like-minded. They have the same needs, expectations, problems to solve, jobs to be done, that kind of thing. That's what a persona really is. So I use the example of buying a car because this was such a great example 5 years ago, and it really differentiates what it means to know your customers and understand those personas. So that we did a journey mapping workshop years ago, buying a car, and we had 3 different personas. One of them was a man in his 50s with a truck, or who needed a truck to pull his toys, right? Very different from, and I'll just talk about 2 personas because it really just calls out the very huge difference between these people, right? So the first one was guy in his 50s, truck, needs something to pull his toys, all of that. The second persona was a family who had a child who had just turned 16, and they wanted to get a car that was safe and affordable, and insurance wasn't crazy, but most importantly safe for their new teenage driver, right? And so two very different types of customers, and 2 very different ways that we approach those customers, right? And to know the stories behind those customers allows us to take that experience and make it a different experience, right? So the parents, who's coming in to look at the car, the parents or parents and child? Maybe the parents come in first and they're looking at, and then maybe the second time they bring the child along, those kinds of things. And we need to be aware of that so that we have different conversations with them versus the guy who's out there looking for a bigger truck for all his toys. And we're like, okay, we know what you need, let's go, and it's a different conversation, and it's a different approach, and it's a different journey that we take, because maybe over here with the parents and the child, now we want to educate them and the child, call child, teenager, on what it's like to buy your first car, and spend a little bit more time, because now what we're doing is we're building the relationship. The guy with the truck, maybe this is his 3rd time buying from this dealership. They already know him. They know him really well because he's already been there. He's just upgrading. He's just getting bigger truck or a newer truck or whatever it is, right? So the conversations are very different. And the same thing in the contact center, right? If you've got customers who are calling in who've been longtime customers versus somebody who's a newer customer who maybe it's their first call into the contact center, you're going to handle them differently, most likely, right? Different one's calling about a billing issue and another one's calling about a product issue. So maybe there's going to be some different handling of that as well. So maybe one's got an iPhone and another one's got a Samsung, whatever. And we've got to handle those folks differently because they're different products and they're different expectations and, blah, blah, blah. So that's why it's important to define these personas, do the research to really understand who your customers are. And then it's not enough just to know that. Obviously, you've got to socialize that. So you have to let your employees know these different persona types. And it's important, even in the contact center, if you can do it, to identify for each individual customer which persona that customer falls into. So go into your CRM system, your contact center system, right? And identify, put the personas in there and let the agent know what persona type they're going to be talking to, so that they can frame the conversation or prepare for the call in a different way too.
So I guess a little bit of a challenge question. So
right.
Most of the contact centers and companies that I go into, they've all got the corporate corporate rules and their mission statement and their values. They've all got them on the wall.
Yeah.
And if you get an opportunity to talk to the C-suite, they can recite them, and they know exactly what they are. And they usually lead with it and talk about it and talk about what value it brings. And then you go down to the contact center, and they have just as many signs on the wall. Yeah. And if it's run well, they know what they are. But there's a pretty big disconnect between the customer entry point in a contact center, one of the customer entry point contact center, and the C-suite. So if I'm a leader on the contact center end, and there is this disconnect, and you spend a lot of time with C-suite people, what does that person do? How do they? I'm just looking for some ideas for them. Obviously, they can try to work the culture and try to create their own culture down below. But I'm just looking for anything that you've seen or any success stories you've had on how does the bottom tell the top what's going on if the top thinks they already know what's going on and we don't get a lot of time to tell them anyway. That's an easy question for you.
I think there are a couple of different things that you're getting at there. I'll start with one, which is, the whole notion of the posters on the wall and everything, right? I think one of the most important things, not just with your corporate statements, but with your core values, is that they have to be socialized and operationalized, right? So socialized means not just posters on the wall. I have one client that does values training for all of their employees once a year. New employees, when they come on board, they will incorporate their core values training into their orientation and onboarding processes, right? But once a year, to remind employees about the core values, they will do a values training it's pretty much every January. But then there's other ways that they socialize those, right? I've also, with clients that I've worked with, established a culture committee to make sure that, and those culture committees will ensure that exactly that the core values become socialized and socialized in different ways. So maybe we have a monthly or a quarterly value of the month or value of the quarter, where we're nominating peers who have lived up to that core value, right? Or we're doing brown bag lunches where we talk about what that value means and provide examples of how we've lived those values throughout the day or throughout the month or whatever it is. But they also have to be operationalized. And what that means is that we can't develop any policies, processes, make decisions without bringing those values in, right? And those values have to be at the core of that. So if we have a value that is around safety, or a value that's around, putting customers first, or whatever the value is, right? When we're making decisions, or we're developing policies, that customer voice and that core value has to be brought into this. How well does this align with the values of the organization? So I think that's a big part of it. And we need to talk about the core values too, in our weekly meetings or whatever it is. They need to be front and center, and we need to provide examples so that employees know what's right and not. And eventually that can stop, because now everybody's just living it. And the posters on the wall are just reminders. They're not there to, hey, in your face, here they are, you go figure it out. They're just, hey, reminders. And everybody's like, yeah, we do that. That's not a big deal. So I think that's really the key is, and never mind the fact that leaders have to model those core values, right? Those behaviors are critical.
I went to, a number of years ago, I went to a business event. There was like 100 people, and it was at Burlington Northern Railroad in Texas. And it was a basic function. They just had it in their facility, and it was their network operation facility. So, you could kind of see all the trains and that kind of stuff. So we walked in, we sat down at the seats, and the Burlington Northern person that welcomed us, the very first thing that he said was, I just want you to know that the emergency exits are on both sides of the doors. If there is any sort of concern, we're going to proceed down this hallway. Someone will meet you there. There'll be a red band and the fastest access out. And he spent literally 4 minutes before he said welcome, before he said hello, before he did anything. And then when he made his presentation and he showed us their core values, safety was the #1 core value. And I went, wow. Now there's an example of living your values. And there wasn't, and even for somebody outside the company, I knew that safety was what they were all about.
Yeah, agreed. I have a client, we do virtual workshops, and on the agenda, every agenda, we say hello, and then the very next thing is the safety message. There's a 3-minute safety message in every single workshop. And it's like, well, we're not even there. We're all virtual, right? But that is part of their core values. So yeah, absolutely. I love it.
So just to pick a couple things out that you said that I wanted to just have you make a comment on. Okay. The difference between the golden rule and the platinum rule.
Yes, this is a favorite one of mine. And I actually met the gentleman who wrote the platinum rule. I never even knew that there was who that was or there was somebody behind that. But, the golden rule has been around since the Bible, right? Treat others the way that treat others the way that we want to be treated, or treat others the way that you would want to be treated, right? Whereas the platinum rule is, and that's not very, to treat others the way that we want to be treated, that's not very customer centric or anything. That's me, right? The platinum rule is treat others the way that they want to be treated. And that's what this is all about, right? That being customer centric is understanding your customers, understanding their needs and their expectations and what their wants and desires are, and then meeting those, right? And so such an important concept is how they want to be treated versus how we want to be treated. And I think we all want to be treated differently. There was the story that I shared in that particular chapter in the book where it was Dale Carnegie was talking about, going fishing, and he's like, well, I like strawberries and cream, but I try to put that on a fishing hook and it just doesn't work for the fish, so, and I don't like worms. So there's that. So a very extreme example, but a great example of what that means to really know your audience and know who you're dealing with and understand them and embrace that.
Well, listen, you just gave me an opening there that I'm now going to take advantage of. So you just told me that was one of your favorites. So my next question would be, give me one or two more of your favorites, please.
Well, that's like asking me to pick my favorite child, which is tough to do because I love both of my boys equally. But, that I think I like that one because it really embodies all of it. And I think that's how I sort of wrapped up that chapter, is that one really embodies all of the principles. But I think my favorite ones are probably customer understanding is the cornerstone of customer centricity. I mean, that's really what it's all about. Employees more first, certainly, and leadership. We have not spent a lot of time talking about leadership, but leadership, commitment, and alignment, right? And mentioned earlier that the culture is the shadow of the leader, and if we don't have every single leader on board and everybody's not aligned on this type of culture that we're trying to design, with a customer-centric one, then it becomes a fragmented business, right? And it becomes siloed, and it becomes painful for customers, not only employees but for customers as well, because it's a different experience from department to department or business unit to business unit. So we want to definitely have that. So I think leadership, commitment, and alignment is a really important one. It all starts from the top. But with the saying goes, the bottleneck is at the top of the bottle. So that's the best way of describing it.
So a couple more questions for you. So what's the best business advice you've ever received? And what's the normal business advice that you hand out if somebody says, hey, tell me something, and you wanted to share some sort of wisdom? What's the best one you've gotten? What's the best one you give?
I think probably the best one that I've got is to just spend time. And actually this is some of the advice that I give too, but I think it's spend time, not just so focused on the things that we focus on. We focus on customer experience, but to learn, I don't even know the best way to put this, but to look outside the box, right? To come up with ideas outside of what we typically look at. And you don't have to go and read every customer experience book or every book about employees or employee experience or culture. Go look at other things that aren't even, it's amazing the stories that you'll read or hear about in those other things that aren't even related to customer experience. And you go, oh, there's a story in the book about, I forget the name of the show now, that it was the story about Heinz ketchup. And it was a show on the History Channel about how America was built, or how America was, something like that. And it was that whole story that as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, gosh, I'm watching the stories about all these different brands and what they went through as they evolved. And that's where there's some connection there to customer experience. So my point is, go and look outside the box, because you're going to come up with some great ideas outside. And honestly, when I go to talk to my clients and they're asking me, well, how do we fix this? How do we do things differently? Or how do we do things better? I'm like, don't look at your competitors, go outside, look at other industries and see what they're doing and adapt. You're not going to be able to do the exact same things they're doing, but adapt it for what you're doing, or just be inspired by the things that you hear and see others doing outside of your box.
Yeah, we tell contact centers all the time that, when your customer calls and compares you, and, they're not comparing you to another cable company. They're comparing you to the bank, the service they got from the bank that afternoon, from, the store down the street. They're comparing it to their experiences. And so if they just got off the phone with somebody that was professional and communicated great, and they didn't have to wait a terribly long time, and you make them wait 4 times that long, and the person's can't communicate and doesn't get the answer solved, then you have bad customer service, right? I mean, that's where they make the comparison. So the one of the most fascinating things I heard was a gentleman by the name of Jerry Hebert said to me, "What my boss finds interesting, I find fascinating." Was his
Right.
was his advice. And you don't have to like them. You don't have to like he or she, but what they find interesting, you find fascinating, you'll be a little bit more successful on that particular day and probably over the long course as well.
Agreed. Yeah, yeah, that's great advice. Love it.
So I've only got two more questions for you. One, what does Annette Franz do when she's not being an expert in customer experience?
I like to do fun things outdoors. I love to work out. I love to hike, bike, paddleboard, all the outdoor things. So yeah, that's what I love to do. Just stay physically fit and get out.
Nice. And my last question for you is, what question didn't I ask you that I should have?
Oh gosh. It's so funny because when we were talking earlier, I was like, oh, I want to make a point. You just said something and I want to make sure I make that point. I should have written it. I should have written it down, but now it escapes me. But it was about the contact center and about the contact center employees. It'll come back to me. I know it'll come back to me, but oh gosh. Yeah, I don't know that I have one right now. I think we covered the gamuts.
We covered a lot of different things. Well, listen, thank you very, very much for spending some time with us today. I'm very, very grateful that you spent some time understanding that. And, it's people in the contact center work with customer experience all the time. I mean, they deal with customers all the time. And I think sometimes we get kind of a closet focus on what we actually think is going on. And we lose sight of all the other customer entry points, and we come out of the gates thinking we're a silo, and the reality is we can't be a silo because we won't be successful. And you talk about that over and over and over again in your book. And so, listen, if you're watching this video podcast or watched any of my others or listen to any one of my audio podcasts, you know that I end every single one of these with something very simple. You can be a great leader. It just requires a lot of hard work. It requires focus, and it requires you surrounding yourself with people that can help, people that work closely with you, but also people like Annette Franz, where there's a book that you can go out and read and learn and grow. It's been great talking to you this week. I'm not even going to tell you who the next person is, but they'll be super cool, just like Annette is. Annette, again, thank you so much for being with us. Everybody else, look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye now.